Good evening and welcome to another webinar on food safety. I'm Steve Pepper and I own Steve Pepper Training Associates. Tonight I'm joined by Mark Williams. Good evening, Mark.
Hello, good evening.
Yes. Right yourself?
Yes, I'm Mark Williams. I'm an environmental health consultant specialising in housing, and just here to see what I can learn about food safety or remind myself about food safety.
Okay, I'm joined by Jude Hutchinson. Good evening, Jude.
Evening.
Sorry?
I said good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, that's fine, yeah.
Right, well, I'm the director at HSF Training, and today we're going to have a little look at food defence management.
Okay, just need to start the screen share and click onto here, and there we go.
Today I thought it'd be interesting to have a look at food defence management. It's an age-old concept. For example, people in high positions all over the world for many centuries have had food testers. However, it's becoming more of a requirement for food businesses to have a look whether they're manufacturers, retailers or caterers, and identify whether they need to take any extra precautions. Just so that we know what food defence is, it's all about preventing deliberate contamination and threat to the food industry. It's things like looking after malicious attacks, and these might come from ideologically motivated attacks, or might be politically motivated, but it's about stopping that and their threat. Organisation defines this as an act or threat of deliberate contamination of food for human consumption with chemical, biological or radionucleic agents for the purpose of causing injury or death to civilian populations and or disruption of social, economic or political stability. Between food defence and food safety is that food safety is all about contamination. Defence is about preventing contamination which is deliberate and where someone's trying to hurt somebody. So you have to think all about goals a little bit differently. Some of the reasons why people might deliberately contaminate food can be complex, but it may be linked to the high economic value of the food industry, the fact that it's a very easy target, and so you can get lots of people at once because everybody has to eat, and it's relatively easy to infiltrate. So it's quite an easy target. And those people who may wish to contaminate food maliciously include criminals, disgruntled employees who may feel that they've been unfairly treated, or maybe they're under the threat of redundancy, alienated or extreme groups wishing to disrupt the food chain and to gain publicity, maybe extreme groups. Animal welfare or environmental considerations, and they wish to make a point. So there's lots of times like this can actually happen. Whilst it isn't common, it is a real threat, and the examples include an insecticide which was put in deliberately into some ground beef. This insecticide contained nicotine, and they put it into 1,700 tonnes of ground beef. 111 people were ill, and all because the person actually just had a grudge against his supervisor. In another case, 750 people were ill when the Bhagwan Sri Raj niche political party deliberately contaminated some salad bars and restaurants in 10 local restaurants in America, and they did this with salmonella. And this was an attempt to incapacitate the voting population of the city so that their own candidate would win an election. So that's another example of how something could happen. There are also many other examples, including yogurt being contaminated with rat poison deliberately, which ended up with 2 young children dying in a kindergarten in China. Oranges being injected with mercury. This was a political group who wanted to cause problems with Israeli oranges, and they did so successfully. Brass being placed into baby food, which caused a huge recall, and even mice being put into the ceilings of rival restaurants' premises in an attempt to give them an infestation and close them down. So we don't really have time to look in depth about how to develop a food defence plan, but ideally it should include conducting a risk assessment, and a group of people should really be involved. Obviously, if you're just a one-man band, there's not an awful lot you can do about that. First stage would be to identify how vulnerable you are. So you need to consider just how much effort you need to put into this. And you need to be looking at whether you have any sensitive products and processes, whether manufacturing processes are easy to deliberately interfere with them, whether the people you employ, for example, are likely to cause a problem. For example, are they stressed, are they easily influenced, or are they potentially compromised in another way? All of this will help you to build a suitable plan to work from. Then you need to assess the vulnerability of your operation, and therefore you need to start to look at the perimeter, and are there any gaps in the perimeter? Is it easy to get in? What's the security like? Where do people park their cars? You need to think about the actual building. The door's locked. How easy would it be to get in through the roof? What about windows? Is it multi-sited, so therefore it's quite hard to identify where everybody is at once? Are there key processes where maybe the plant's uncovered, so it would be easy to put something into the product at that point? Is delivery and receiving of goods at the other end, how are you going to make sure they're safe? Have you got decent systems with regard, or is there a gap with regards to receiving goods and ordering goods? Could it have been contaminated on the way? And the people who you work with, both managers and workers and contractors. Dressing them, for example, if we're going on to short time. I've got stressed employees, I've got people who might be easily influenced. All of those things need to be considered, and that will help us identify our vulnerability. And a good is off the internet and have part of your defence plan. After that, we're really looking to control, and we'll look at that in a second. But you need to always be focusing that the purpose of a food defence plan is to reduce the risk of intentional contamination. Your actions need to make the vulnerable elements of the operation more secure. And the goal is to provide the protection in the most economical way. There's no point in spending £1 million to have no benefit. You've really got to look at what can I do that's quick and easy and will really keep my food a little bit safer as a accidental contamination, which I think we're all reasonably good at nowadays. 3 simple things that you can consider and known as it, locking, access. These 3 things for a retail area as well. Quick. Includes vehicles. Keep it locked, and then therefore it can be kept safe. Another thing that you need to consider locking again is things like chemicals as well, because then it's harder for people to put things in. It's easier for people to notice if things are wrong. Much easier to do it. And also limit access. So have it so that certain areas are restricted to certain people. Don't just let anybody through. Consider how you're going to control visitors, how you're going to control agency workers, how you're going to control contractors, and how you're going to limit their access. So do consider looking at those sorts of things and working out how you're going to do them, because all of these will help you to control much more effectively. As we've already said, it's important to make sure that whatever we do is fairly and start at the most economical type of things. It's about perhaps changing a procedure. So when we're employing new staff or agency staff, do we check references of the people who bring in log? Do we update our specifications to include a little bit of food defence? Have we validated work permits when contractors come? Put passwords on. Things like these will mean that everything is a little more secure. Next, with regards to economy, it's technology and equipment. So considering things like dust-to-dawn lighting externally, making sure that our locks are suitable, that there's more than one lock, that we have audible alarms maybe as well when doors are open, and that maybe we have barriers so that it's harder for people to ram raid somewhere or get through a back door easily. So barriers such as fencing, such as iron bars on windows, etc., will be very helpful externally like that to keep things just that little bit safer to see. The least economical is actually looking at including extra people. So, but it might be necessary, but things like employing more secure, get them checked themselves. Are they making sure that they have been trained, taking up their references as well? But also little things might help that through a process, for example, having two-person tasks every now and again. That can be quite a useful thing to do. So nobody's ever working in a vulnerable area on their own. That could work very well. These are just some examples of changes that could be made. There are many more, but they give an overview of some of the things that you might wish to implement. To sum up then, when we are developing a defence programme, we need to identify the likelihood, we need to consider the sensitivity of the product, the countries we're selling to or buying from, the manufacturing methods, the people, the supply chain as well, and any vulnerable areas within that. And that leads us nicely into assessing the vulnerability. We need to be looking again at our supply chain, the perimeter of our premises, the premises themselves, the plants we use, the equipment we use, the processes that the food goes through, the people who actually handle the food along the way, our actual product, considered, and our brand. Could that be compromised in some way easily by social media or by something like that? Could cause a problem within the brand. We then need to control and monitor. And here we need some simple, practical and economical and effective controls, some of which we've already discussed. And it's very important that these are communicated as well, so that people do know what the controls are there for, and they do know to challenge somebody who may be in an unauthorised area, etc. So all that's very important as well. And then there's one last part, and that's developing a response plan should anything actually happen, unfortunately, and our controls haven't worked, etc. So then we need to make sure that we're able to do something should it go wrong. And here we need to consider how we're going to contain the problem, what we're going to do with the actual food that's been harmed, but also we need contact numbers, emergency contact numbers, business contact numbers for people within the business, our customers, suppliers. We'll need a map so that emergency services know where to get into, maybe the water supply or the gas supply if that's been contaminated, where all the problems the problems are. Also, we'll need some form of diagnosis, which we'll probably need to use experts for. So to how we're going to dispose of safely the food, depending on what it is. A recall plan. Now, a lot of big companies will already have a recall plan and a crisis management plan in place, but they perhaps need to look back and just check that it is allowing for things like food defence and deliberate contamination as opposed to anything else, and that works suitably for them. For smaller businesses, then they probably won't have this in place. So it's worth them thinking in advance of the response they're going to do to help prevent some sort of knee-jerk action in the end. And that ends the presentation. Obviously, it's a much bigger subject than this, as always, but I thought it would be really good because it might promote some discussion. It's quite interesting, a little bit different, and something that I think that tutors are being asked a little bit more about, especially with food safety, because it does link directly, although it's slightly different.
Right, thank you very much, Jude. That's great. Mark?
Sorry, we seem to have lost a bit of sound here and there, but hopefully we got the message. That is on YouTube, and it seems to play okay as well. So if you did want to go and look at it, you could go and go via mine and go and look at YouTube.
We can edit it later on and put on the final version. We can actually re-edit the video totally, so we don't lose any sound. I don't know what happened with the dropout, but it will be fine on the night, as it were.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Sorry, Mark. You were saying.
Oh right, no, I was just listening to that. It's amazing, really, that you can. It's not only you've got to worry about employing staff and making sure the staff, do what you want them to do, and you're successful, profitable, you do all the right things, but then somebody can come along and just do something like that. Wow, I mean, it's a shame that you've even got to think about that.
Wow. I think it's worth thinking about. That's why I wanted to do it. It's a bit different, but it's quite topical because it's the sort of thing that we're quite worried. The US have identified that the food industry is one of the 17 critical areas for terrorism because they're just such an open, easy target, and everybody has to eat. So I thought it'd be quite useful, but not just look at it perhaps in the manufacturing, which is what the presentation looked at, but also just little caterers and the simple things they can do. I think the message is it's not about doing lots and lots of things. It's all about putting in some sensible things and identifying your little bit first. Your vulnerable areas.
And I guess sorry, Stephen. And I guess in this day and age, I suppose you can't really just say. I mean, I suppose if you do a risk assessment, you've got to take into account all the possible risks which are likely to happen. I suppose in this day and age, you can't really say, well, terrorism doesn't really happen, does it? Because it's such a it's just there. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And disgruntled employees as well. That's probably your biggest threat, in fairness. Somebody who's got a bit of a grudge against somebody, something like that. So yeah.
The thing I was going to say, a lot of on manufacturing, you've got large numbers of people, difficult to get to know everyone personally. But generally speaking, in catering, whether it's a hotel, a restaurant, or whatever, the head chef, the manager, the supervisors tend to know the staff better. And I think if they manage staff well and they notice changes in the staff's behaviour, or if they know they've sicked someone off and you're more likely to target where it's an individual member of your own staff. I think the problem is when it's not your own staff and maybe your suppliers or where you buy stuff from, someone else can, I think Jude mentioned at some stage, someone can sneak in the back door or, come on an agency staff, temporary staff, that type of thing. And that could be a problem.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that hasn't been mentioned, and I didn't really put it into the, it's a big subject, so you can only put so much into the time, was also your supply chain, both forwards and backwards. So if you deliver two people, and also your food coming in, and how you're going to make sure that hasn't been contaminated to start with. So it's, there's a little bit more to it than meets the eye originally. But you're right. It's about identifying, if you're a small catering business, it's about someone coming in the back door, or it's about a random customer and the open things like maybe a buffet or something like that somebody could contaminate. And the same in retail. Where are the dark areas that people could get into and start to cause a problem?
And I guess thinking about it, I thought, so actually when you think about it, the effects, I suppose it depends where in the chain you are as to how serious the actual outcome can be. Because I mean, if you're the person at the end who, I suppose you're the caterer and it happens to you, that's bad. But if you're the person who, I don't know, think about makes butter and makes butter for lots of caterers and businesses and whatnot, I suppose they would probably, or those sort of, I suppose the ingredients, they're probably the most at risk, I would have thought.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's been a case of alleged glass in baby food, and that was the end of the company, really. A vulnerable
Wow.
and glass in baby food, and you can't detect it, and deliberate contamination, and that was pretty much the end of the company.
Wow.
Sorry, Jude. The one that got me a few years ago was when someone was squirting mercury into oranges, because you can't really, if you've got something like a syringe, you can't detect that unless you've got a metal detector. And let's face it, how many supermarkets put food through a metal detector on the shop floor? And it takes seconds for someone to do something like that.
That was one of the ones that I think the sound went on, but it was a politically motivated one. It was Israeli oranges, and it was the Palestinian Revolutionary Army who did it, and they actually found out they probably contaminated them as they came into port in Holland. Cost thousands of pounds, and obviously 4 children were sick, but it was the thousands of pounds in the time, and the economy, obviously, that it hit the Israeli economy, because it's a big thing. So there's a lot of problems.
What I was going to ask, I mean, I suppose it's actually interesting sort of doing this topic, because one of the things I've always personally want to know, because when something like this happens, obviously the next thing potentially you could have a product recall going on. I've always wanted to know who pays for a product recall, and I thought it must be so expensive and such a difficult thing to actually do, to recall your products, and then a confidence between you and your your customers, if you're a manufacturer, to having to contact your manufacturer. Oh wow! I mean, just thinking about it, it's like wow.
Generally, it's the manufacturers that pay for a recall. Obviously, they may well be able to push those costs back if it was from a product that was supplied by somebody to them that they've used. But generally, it's manufacturers. And yeah, it's the brand name, though, isn't it, as well? So it affects everybody. It's not just the cost of the recall, it's the cost of the loss of confidence in the brand.
Yeah. Is it something that you can insure against, as in product recall?
To a point, but it's like everything, it depends on how well you've managed it, which is really what this is about, because if you haven't managed it, then your insurers aren't going to pay out if you haven't done everything reasonably practicable to prevent it.
Yeah, the one thing that gets me, obviously I'm on the email list for the Food Standards Agency and also for their allergen one, and we probably get 2 or 3 emails a day for product recalls for allergens, and that's actually significantly more than it is for food defence type issues.
Absolutely, it's not common, but it is something that I think people need to think about. For allergens, it's normally mispacking, to be honest. They're normally packed incorrectly. But for this type of thing, it's not common, but it is something that is certainly manufacturers are having to look at it more, because there's the new standard for BRC, which has got more in it, and quite a few of them are going for American standards as well, the manufacturers, and there are big requirements if you want to sell into America, with regards to having more requirements as well. So that's why it's becoming big news. But I did think it was interesting. A lot of the things that I researched and found out were actually to do with retail and restaurants. They weren't just in manufacturing.
Yeah.
They weren't exactly where we thought they'd be, so all the manufacturers are doing all this work, but actually a lot of the cases where they're not as easy a targets as primary producers. The middle people are a bit more difficult to get hold of, or the end consumer, because anyone can nip round a supermarket and inject a few things, Yeah.
I was at a large national chain of food manufacturers yesterday, delivering level 4, and the number of passes and signatures. We had electronic passes on the door. I wasn't allowed to go around the building on my own, etc., etc. And no one can get in that place. It's like Fort Knox.
Yeah.
Which is how it should be in a place, because they are vulnerable.
I delivered this a similar course. It was a longer course, but it was about food defence not very long ago in a very low risk manufacturers, and it was like Fort Knox getting in there. But then they sent me off on the shop floor on my own to see how far I could get. It wasn't very far, so they did well, and that was before their training. But it was like, go on, Jude, see who gets you. So they togged me all up and chucked me in, and I got around there. I could have done something, not very far, but I did get somewhere. I got a reasonable distance, but then I was challenged, which was good. So, I was a bit concerned they wouldn't let me out. Somebody had locked me in a cupboard or something, but it did work. An interesting way to test your systems.
Yeah. Just going back to the staff management issue, one of the problems with catering, forget manufacturing for a minute, with catering seems to have an image, particularly with people like Gordon Ramsay and the F word and all the rest, that chefs, the young chefs coming through the ranks expect to be bullied. And I mean, I must admit, when I was on the shop floor as a chef years ago, I also worked on the front of house. So, there wasn't, for me, a barrier where the hot plate was. It was a case of, I could see and understand how the other half lived. And I didn't bawl people out or shout at them. They were allowed to make one mistake, but you never made the same mistake twice. So you can have an attitude and a style of management that lends itself to that. And for any manager or chef listening to this, if you think that you might sometimes go over the top, there is a tool on the health and safety website for stress management, and you can actually work out by following this tool how good or how bad you are at managing your people's stress and what you need to understand. And that can cut out quite a lot of the staff who sitting up with the boss type of thing by not stressing people out.
Things like that, absolutely. And again, as I say, this course is it's a day. You could go on for a few days, so I sort of had to fit it all into 10 to 15 minutes. But that's something that comes out of the course, about looking after your staff, building inclusive relationships with them. You don't have to be best buddies with everyone, but you do have to be aware of the stresses you put on people. And it's a stressful industry. Everybody's shouting at everyone because they want the dinner out fast. The customer complains, and so it goes on.
Yeah. Anyway, I think it's about 8 o'clock now here. Have anyone got any final comments on the subject, or any points they'd like to make that we haven't covered?
For me, I'm just to be honest, before we came on tonight, I hadn't really thought too much about. I thought with food defence, this will be interesting to hear what this is all about. But it's I don't know. I just think as a business owner or a manufacturer, that there's so many things which are out there, which are just, I guess at times must feel like they're just out to get the business owners. Must feel like just under attack all the time and constantly be on the defensive. And it's just, I don't know. It's just a real shame. And I mean, does it ever happen? Have you ever known that a manufacturer has been prosecuted because they've not identified or managed the risks associated with being attacked in this kind of attack?
I don't think we have yet, and I think the thing is it's unlikely to be prosecuted because it's, or less likely to be because it's a sort of, it's not a usual thing. However, more and more people won't buy from people who aren't putting measures in. Mm-hmm. So I think the thing is, I agree with you, Mark, it's a shame. It's one more thing to think about, but unfortunately, it's probably worth thinking about because this is a bit different to anything else. It's not meeting the law. It's all about making your business safe. So it's a little bit different. It's not just sort of meeting the law and being prosecuted. It's about making your own business safe. And it doesn't take a lot. The whole thing's about looking at what you're not doing well and then doing something, not just writing it all down left, right and centre. It's not trying to put more work on people. It's just, reminding your staff to lock the doors, really. Not having any dark areas, But
also, I think what's interesting about, sorry to cut you, Steve. I think what's interesting about this is that it's funny how when you're you start off trying to control the risks, the risks of food terrorism, and the outcome of doing that. And when you was talking about the catering industry there, Steve, it's almost like by trying to control food terrorism and putting those sort of measures in place, you're almost helping staff morale. And it's kind of, I just think that's kind of funny how that, you don't want to upset your staff and cause them to try and, make them try and damage your business. So you try and be a bit nicer to your staff, which you probably should be anyway.
Well, I agree totally. I think that's the same with a lot of stuff. It's about good management, and that's what a lot of this is about. I think the difference and the thing that we're having to try and get people to think differently when they're doing some sort of risk assessment is that it's not a health and safety risk assessment and it's not a food safety risk assessment. You've got to sort of think like a how could somebody hurt my product as opposed to an accidental, which I think some people end up getting a bit confused with. long as that's what it's about.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's all about PR and brand protection and the economics of it as well. Yeah. And making sure you're getting the balance right between making sure that your product is not open to attack, and that you've got, I think from a due diligence point of view, if you've got systems in place and something happens, at least you've got some defence to say, well, we did consider it, and we can't, you know, for example, with the mercury in the oranges, it's something you can't really do much about, you know, because it's very difficult to stop. But if at least if you thought about it, you've got a policy and then the policy works for most of the time, then at least you've got the due diligence.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, anyway, on that note, I'd like to thank you, Jude, for doing the presentation. And again, as always, Mark, thank you very much for doing joining the conversation afterwards. I know food's not your forte, but it's always refreshing to have someone else's view. So it's good night from me, Mark.
And good night from me.
Jude.
Good night from me. Good night from me.
Right, I'll stop the broadcast there, but just hang on line a couple of seconds. A couple of things I just want to go through later. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.